Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere ancient, strange, and a little melodramatic, straight into the myths of ancient Greece. You're floating in a place before time, before land, before sky, just endless dark mist, like someone forgot to turn on the universe. It's quiet, weirdly peaceful, until chaos appears, not the yelling, flailing kind, but more like a sleepy soup of possibility. Out of chaos comes Gaia, Mother Earth herself, and just like that, the floor shows up under your feet. Then comes Uranus, the sky, who, classic mistake, immediately marries his mom. Yeah, welcome to Greek mythology. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're drifting off somewhere far from Mount Olympus, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're sitting beside Gaia as she's giving birth to mountains, oceans, and titans like she's baking cookies, except every cookie comes with world-altering powers. Uranus, her husband's son Sky Guy, grows paranoid fast. He starts stuffing their kids back into Gaia's belly, which, yes, sounds both painful and metaphorically loaded. The Titans are cramped, annoyed, and probably traumatized. Gaia, understandably miffed, crafts a sickle out of flint and recruits her son Cronus for a bit of divine rebellion. You probably won't survive this next part, but hey, you're just a sleepy observer. One night, Cronus ambushes Uranus and slices off, well, let's say his source of sky. The bits fall into the sea. And from that foamy mess, Aphrodite is born, because Greek myths never miss a chance to be slightly inappropriate and totally magical. Cronus now rules the cosmos. He's confident, smug. He marries his sister Rhea, don't ask, and begins producing baby gods like he's setting up his own Olympian startup. But there's a prophecy, because of course there is. One of his kids will overthrow him, just like he overthrew Daddy Sky. So Cronus, in peak paranoid dad mode, starts swallowing his children whole. Baby after baby, down the hatch. Poseidon, Hades, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, gone. And yes, apparently, god babies don't require chewing. Now, historians still argue whether this whole baby-eating thing was symbolic or a wildly literal oral tradition, but either way, it's not great parenting. Rhea, tired of birthing snacks, hatches a plan. When her sixth child, Zeus, is born, she swaps him for a rock wrapped in swaddling clothes. Cronus gulps down the stone without noticing. 10 for confidence. 0, 10 for taste buds. Meanwhile, you're crouched inside a damp cave on the island of Crete. Baby Zeus is tucked away, safe, and surrounded by mystical goat nannies and a noisy gang of armored dancers called the Curetes. They bang their spears to drown out his cries, which means bedtime here sounds more like a heavy metal concert than a lullaby. Still, Zeus thrives. You peek outside the cave and see the world shifting. The Titans rule, but cracks are forming. Whispers grow of a child hidden, of a rebellion coming. It's quiet for now, like that moment before a storm, and you feel the weight of the myth settling around you. Not heavy, just enough to make you sink deeper into your pillow, imagining a world built on chaos, birth, betrayal, and sky. A mainstream fact for your sleepy little brain, many ancient Greeks genuinely believed the gods lived on Mount Olympus, a real mountain in northern Greece that they could point to. Olympus was their divine penthouse, out of reach, but oddly local, like spotting Zeus at your neighborhood diner. And here's your quirky tidbit. Ancient Greek storytellers often acted out these tales at parties and festivals. Imagine ending dinner with someone dramatically miming Cronus eating babies. That's some post-dessert theatre. And so, in the quiet hush of mythological time, you float just above it all, between chaos and cosmos, past sky and stone and godly indigestion. The baby has been hidden, the rock digested, and the stage is set for rebellion. You're still tucked away on Crete, and baby Zeus is not so baby anymore. He's grown into a charming, storm-eyed teenager with a suspicious talent for throwing things when angry, mostly lightning. You've spent years watching him train with nymphs, wrestle magical goats, and occasionally scowl in the direction of the sky. The world outside your hidden cave has aged. The Titans still rule, but you can hear it in the wind. Their time is running out. One morning, Zeus stretches, yawns, and says, "Time to free my siblings." Which sounds simple until you remember. They've been swallowed by a cosmic cannibal. So Zeus does what any future god-king would. He seeks out Metis, the goddess of clever thinking, because brute strength alone won't get you past a stomach full of deities. Metis hands Zeus a potion, a gnarly mix of mustard, emetic herbs, and something probably illegal. Zeus tricks Cronus into drinking it during a festive god feast. One gag reflex later, and Cronus vomits up his adult children like a divine piñata. They emerge fully grown and surprisingly composed, dusting themselves off like, "Thanks for that, bro." Historians still argue whether this part symbolizes rebirth, cyclical time, or the ancient Greeks' strangely detailed interest in stomach contents. Either way, the family reunion is complete and incredibly awkward. Now, you're standing with the newly freed gods. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades clasp wrists like action heroes. Demeter nods calmly. Hestia glows with quiet warmth. Hera sighs with the kind of exhaustion only oldest sisters know. This is no longer a group of victims. They're a resistance. Together, they launch a full-blown titanomachy. That's just a fancy way of saying 10 years of apocalyptic war between gods and titans. Thunder cracks, earth shatters. You spend most of this era ducking behind immortal boulders and trying not to get stepped on. The E-Titans, led by Cronus and his heavy-hitting siblings, fight like the world is theirs to keep. But the Olympians? They're younger, sharper, and frankly, have better marketing. Zeus rains down lightning like it's confetti. Poseidon calls up waves tall enough to drown mountains. Hades, quiet guy, sneaks beneath the battlefield, opens the earth, and swallows enemies whole. The tide turns when Zeus releases the 100-handed ones. You remember those guys? Giant, slightly terrifying creatures with 50 heads and 100 arms each. They'd been imprisoned by Cronus long ago, which, in hindsight, was a tactical error. Freed and angry, they hurl mountains like dodgeballs, turning the battle into mythological chaos. Eventually, the Olympians win. The Titans are defeated, stripped of power, and banished to Tartarus, the deep, gloomy pit beneath the underworld, guarded by those same 100-handed ones, just to rub it in. You float above the battlefield now, where the sky clears for the first time in ages. Zeus stands tall, lightning bolt in hand, and claims the throne of Olympus. His brothers get their domains too. Poseidon takes the sea, Hades gets the underworld. The world as we, sort of, know it begins to take shape. Here's a mainstream fact to anchor you. The Titanomachy myth was so foundational that ancient poets like Hesiod treated it as cosmic history. For them, this wasn't just a story. It explained why the gods were in charge and why storms, seas, and death had such personalities. And now for a slightly weird tidbit. The ancient Greeks believed Mount Etna in Sicily was where Zeus trapped the monster Typhon, another post-Titan war problem. So if the volcano erupted, totally normal. That was just Zeus reinforcing the lid. And so beneath your sleepy eyelids, you watch Olympus rise from the rubble. Golden halls shimmer above the clouds. The gods are young, powerful, and filled with flaws, just like the humans who made them. But for now, there's peace. You drift beside baby Zeus, no longer a baby, who once hid from his fate in a goat-filled cave. Now he rules the skies. You blink, and now you're standing on a shimmering cloud. It's soft but somehow solid beneath your feet, and the air smells faintly of olives and lightning. This, finally, is Mount Olympus. Not the rocky mountain mortals climb, but the divine version. Polished columns, endless feasts, and dramatic family squabbles echoing through the halls. Zeus lounges on his golden throne, beard immaculately curled. He looks powerful, regal, and slightly bored. On his left, Hera glares at him with the precision of a woman who's memorized every one of his lies. To his right, Poseidon grumbles about getting seasick in the clouds. Hades is notably absent. He prefers the quiet hum of the underworld, where dead souls don't gossip quite as much. Olympus is less of a peaceful paradise, and more like a never-ending holiday dinner with relatives who've known each other too long. The 12 Olympians each have their throne, their quirks, and their grudges. You wander through their private quarters, not that you're invited, and overhear squabbles about honor, love, stolen cattle, and someone putting ambrosia in someone else's sandals. Historians still argue whether the gods were always seen as this human-like, or if later poets projected their own messiness onto them. Either way, the divine drama is endless. You peek into Ares' war room. He's flexing for no one, sharpening his spear unnecessarily. Aphrodite floats by, leaving the scent of roses and scandal in her wake. Hermes zips past with winged sandals and a cheeky grin. He's probably off to trick someone into trading their livestock for a rock painted gold. The Olympians aren't evil. They're just complicated. Immortal soap opera characters with lightning bolts and major boundary issues. One evening you join them for a feast. The ambrosia tastes like everything you've ever loved. Nectar flows like honey, and everyone pretends not to be so. Pieing on everyone else. Muses sing, nymphs dance, and Apollo is tuning his golden lyre for the 15th time because someone dared to sing off-key. And still, despite the beauty and power, Olympus is haunted by insecurity. These gods rose from a violent rebellion. Their reign is young. They know better than anyone that gods can fall. You catch Hera whispering to herself, her eyes distant. Zeus occasionally glances at the horizon as if expecting someone to return. The throne room may be gold, but the cracks are forming. Here's a solid historical anchor. The Greek pantheon wasn't fixed at first. Different city-states had different favourite gods. Athens, of course, championed Athena. Sparta had Ares. The myths we know were shaped by centuries of storytelling, politics, and good old-fashioned fan fiction. And your quirky tidbit? The ancient Greeks believed the gods watched and sometimes judged Olympic athletes. Victors often dedicated their prizes to Zeus, just in case he was watching and ready to smite the loser with cramps. You wander to the edge of Olympus, feet dangling above the mortal world. Far below, humans pray, fight, love, and build little temples from stone and hope. The gods watch, intervene, mess things up, and occasionally fall in love. The line between heaven and earth blurs, and as you rest here, shoulder brushing a column carved from cloud, you realize Olympus isn't about perfection. It's about personality. These gods are flawed, dramatic, hilarious, and utterly human, which ironically makes them divine. You're sipping Ambrosia again, mostly out of boredom now, when the sound of yelling cuts through the airy halls of Olympus. And not the usual kind either. This is a woman's fury echoing like thunder in heels. You follow the noise to find Hera, queen of the gods, in full majestic meltdown. Zeus is nowhere to be seen, which is a bad sign, because when Hera's this loud it usually means he's somewhere he shouldn't be, likely disguised as a swan, a bull, a cloud, or something ridiculous. He has a problem with fidelity. Hera has a bigger problem with being made to look like a fool. You slip into her wake as she paces the palace, long robes trailing like storm clouds. Every few centuries or so, she tries to keep her cool, and then some new wood nymph gets accidentally seduced, and we're back at square one. But Hera doesn't scream or throw thunderbolts. No, she gets creative. There's a cow grazing in the courtyard. Not just any cow, Io, once a priestess of Hera's own temple. Zeus liked her a lot, so, to hide the affair, he turned Io into a literal heifer. Hera, not fooled for a second, asked for the cow as a gift, then posted a 100-eyed giant to guard her, because that's love, Olympus style. Eventually, Zeus rescues Io, but not before Hera adds yet another page to her burn book. She doesn't go after Zeus directly, she never really does. It's the women she targets, the mortals, the nymphs, the demigods in progress. Maybe she can't punish her thunder-hurling husband, but she can sure ruin someone else's day. Historians still argue whether Hera's wrath was symbolic of maternal power or a reflection of ancient Greek social anxiety around powerful women. Either way, the myths paint her as both queen and antagonist, depending on who's telling the story. You spend a day, or what feels like one, drifting behind her. She's visiting shrines, hurling pointed remarks at Apollo, checking in with her peacocks, yes, plural, and making sarcastic comments about marriage that would rival any late-night host. You catch a moment of quiet, though, when she's watching mortals light candles in her name. There's a softness in her eyes, a strange, still dignity, and you start to understand her. She's not just mad, she's been made into a goddess of loyalty in a world where loyalty is a joke. She's tasked with protecting marriage, while living in the most dysfunctional one on Olympus. Still, that doesn't stop her from turning women into birds, flowers, or permanent statues. There's a moral in there somewhere, but even the myths seem unsure. Here's your historical anchor. In many parts of ancient Greece, Hera was worshipped not just as Zeus's wife, but as a powerful deity in her own right, protector of women, childbirth, and even war strategy in some regions. Her cults were among the oldest, and your quirky tidbit, the peacock, Hera's sacred bird, supposedly got its eyes from Argus, the 100-eyed giant. After his death, Hera placed his eyes on the bird's feathers as a memorial, which is either touching or creepy, depending on your sleep level. By evening, Hera finally settles down. You find her sipping nectar near the edge of Olympus, her crown resting beside her like she forgot it was even there. Below, mortals build temples to her, unaware of the exhaustion behind her divinity. You curl beside a warm column, lulled by the hum of distant thunder. Hera mutters something under her breath about Zeus being a thunder-headed goat in a toga, and you smile. Olympus may be built on drama, but tonight you feel the softness beneath the storm. It's very early morning on Olympus, or whatever counts as morning in a timeless realm where the sun is basically someone's cousin. The clouds are pink with pre-dawn light, and somewhere near Zeus's throne, a faint humming sound echoes like wind through a keyhole. You turn, half expecting to find another scandal or peacock, but instead something stranger. A woman in full battle armor, emerging from a man's skull. You blink. Rubbing your eyes doesn't help. Because yes, that really is Athena, the goddess of wisdom, strategy, and popping fully grown from her father's forehead like an idea too big to contain. The story goes like this. Zeus had a headache, a monstrous, splitting one. Since he's the god of the skies, normal aspirin wouldn't cut it, so he did what anyone would do. He asked another god to crack open his skull with an axe. Logical? No. But mythologically, it checks out. And out came Athena, fully grown, fully armoured, and utterly composed. You're not sure which is weirder, the axe surgery, or the fact that she was somehow already wearing sandals. But there she is, radiant, wise, and extremely ready for battle or debate. Historians still argue whether Athena was originally a pre-Greek goddess who got folded into Zeus's mythology, or whether the skull birth is a symbolic tale of wisdom being born from thought. Either way, you've now witnessed one of the most metal birth scenes in literary history. Athena doesn't bother with pleasantries. She's already busy, sword in one hand, scroll in the other. She's got cities to protect, philosophers to inspire, and petty gods to outmaneuver. You follow her through Olympus, watching how even Ares, the god of war, steps aside when she passes. Her domain isn't brute force. It's planning. She's the goddess generals pray to before battle, not for courage, but for tactics, and mortals love her. Athens, her namesake city, made Hotord their patron. They even built the Parthenon to honor her, a glittering temple of logic and beauty. Still, Athena's not without controversy. There's the whole Medusa situation, which we'll get to, and the time she beat Poseidon in a contest by offering an olive tree instead of a spring. Practical? Yes. Exciting? Not really. But Athena plays the long game. You wander into her temple lab library training arena, because of course she has one, and everything smells faintly of parchment, oil, and focus. Scrolls flutter in the breeze, weapons gleam on the walls, owl feathers drift from high rafters, her sacred bird is perched nearby, blinking slowly, unimpressed by your mortal confusion. Here's your mainstream fact to stash under your pillow. Athena was considered a virgin goddess, not in the romantic sense, but in the sense that she was independent. She didn't marry, didn't dally, and never needed a +1 for god banquets. Now for your fringe tidbit. In some fringe myths, Athena may have had a shadow self, Pallas, a possibly mortal companion she accidentally killed and then absorbed into her name, which is like best friend grief meets divine branding. As the day fades, Athena returns to the clouds. She doesn't smile often, but she gives you a look, not unkind, just curious, like a professor quietly approving your nap posture. You curl up beside a stone scroll, warmed by soft torchlight and the quiet humming of distant thought. No thunder, no tantrums, just a goddess born from an idea, sharpening her spear in the silence. You wake to the gentle sound of laughter, and not the refined chuckle of Athena or the dry scoff of Hera. No, this is sloppy, echoing, full-bodied laughter. It bubbles up from the foot of Olympus, where something festive is brewing. You drift down through the clouds, guided by music that sounds like flutes arguing with themselves. Welcome to Dionysus's domain. You're not sure if it's a vineyard, a party, or a hallucination, possibly all three. Dionysus, god of wine, theatre, and joyful chaos, greets you wearing ivy in his hair, a leopard print robe, and no shoes. His smile is wide, slightly glazed, and utterly disarming. He pours you a goblet of wine that shimmers like moonlight and tastes like memory. Then he offers you a goat you politely decline. Dionysus isn't like the other gods. He didn't grow up on Olympus. His birth was complicated. Technically, he died before being born. Zeus rescued his unborn form by stitching it into his thigh. Yes, thigh. And later birthed him in a lightning-flavoured explosion. You know, normal baby stuff. Raised in secrecy by nymphs, Dionysus wandered the earth, bringing wine, song, and the kind of ecstatic dancing that gets you banned from temple courtyards. Mortals either loved him or panicked, sometimes both. His arrival in a town usually meant someone was about to turn into a tree, a grapevine, or a regrettable tattoo. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was always Greek or imported from Eastern cults, based on his unusual blend of intoxication, rebirth, and general weirdness. His worship involved masks, trance, and a lot of shouting, kind of like college theatre majors on a vineyard retreat. You sit by a roaring bonfire as satyrs, those goat-legged, flute-loving party animals, dance in dizzy spirals. Maenads, Dionysus's frenzied followers, whirl past, hair wild, eyes brighter than any logic can explain. The wine flows, the air pulses. But here's the twist. Underneath all this madness, Dionysus teaches something weirdly wholesome. His myth says that letting go of control, ego, inhibition is a kind of wisdom. Cities he visits often learn lessons the hard way. Kings who try to ban his parties usually end up, well, regretting it, or being torn apart by their own mothers. But that's a bedtime story for another time. Tonight you simply sway with the music. There's a rhythm in your bones, a thrum that connects you to the earth and the stars. The wine never runs out. The stars flicker like candlelight. You're surrounded by stories dressed in laughter and sprinkled with divine nonsense. Here's your mainstream history fact. Dionysus was one of the last gods added to the traditional Olympian lineup, and he's the only one with a mortal mother. His festivals, like the Dionysia in Athens, laid the groundwork for modern theatre. And the quirky bit? Some ancient Greeks believed that drinking wine brought them spiritually closer to Dionysus, not just drunk, but enthused, as in literally filled with a god. It's where the word enthusiasm comes from. By the time the bonfire burns low and the satyrs curl up in the moss, you're smiling, sleepy, and slightly dizzy, whether from the wine or the wisdom, it's hard to say. Dionysus tucks a blanket of ivy over your shoulders and hums a lullaby that sounds suspiciously like a drinking song. You're not sure where this place ends and dreaming begins, and that, Dionysus might say, is the whole point. You stir from your Dionysian doze to find yourself in a landscape drained of light. The laughter and vine-soaked air are gone. Everything is still. The sky has darkened into a colour you can't quite name, something between charcoal and memory. You've descended, it seems, into the underworld. But don't panic. This isn't a punishment. Not yet, anyway. You're just visiting. The first thing you notice is the silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that feels ancient, like the world holding its breath. The river Styx flows nearby, inky and slow, its waters rippling with the weight of 1,000 oaths. One sip would bind your soul forever, but you resist the temptation, barely. Then you see him, Hades. He doesn't look evil, he doesn't even look particularly grim. Hades sits on a throne of obsidian, robes dark as midnight, posture perfectly dignified. His hair is neatly tied back. He sips pomegranate juice from a crystal cup and reads something on a scroll, probably soul paperwork. Honestly, he looks tired. Unlike his brothers, Hades doesn't throw tantrums or host wine-fueled orgies. He rules the dead. That's his job. He's not death itself, just the guy in charge of what happens after. The underworld is more bureaucracy than nightmare. Historians still argue whether Hades was feared as a villain or simply respected as a necessary cosmic function. The Greeks were superstitious about speaking his name, but some cults revered him as a protector of souls and wealth, because all gold comes from underground. You wander past the gates, careful not to step on any lost spirits. Cerberus, the three-headed guard dog, yawns lazily. One head eyes you, one naps, and one gnaws on a bone twice your size. Luckily, you're just a tourist. The dead here aren't being tortured. Most are just waiting. Some drift through the asphodel meadows where the average souls go. Not heroes, not villas. Just people who paid taxes and watered their figs. A few lucky or unlucky souls make it to the fields of punishment or Elysium, depending on their earthly deeds. But most, they fade like dreams by breakfast. You pass Sisyphus, still pushing that boulder uphill. He gives you a nod. Just another day at the office. Tantalus waves from his waist-deep pool, still unable to reach the fruit above or the water below. You pretend not to stare. And there, in the dim glow of spectral torches, is Persephone. She's not what you expect. Her gown glitters like frost on autumn leaves. She carries a bouquet of dried flowers and crushed starlight. And beside Hades, she looks content, calm even. They sit together, reading in silence. No thunder, no drama. Just two immortals managing eternity. Of course, Persephone's story isn't exactly peaceful. Hades kidnapped her once. Classic god behavior. But over time, a strange understanding bloomed. She spends half the year above ground with her mother Demeter and half below as queen of the dead. Her coming and going is what makes the seasons change. Here's a mainstream fact to tuck into your sleep thoughts. Persephone's myth was central to the Eleusinian mysteries, a sacred rite promising initiates secret knowledge about life, death, and rebirth. Even Plato hinted it might hold the key to understanding the soul. And for your odd tidbit, some versions of the myth say Persephone only ate 6 pomegranate seeds, one for each month she stays below. A few others claim she ate them on purpose, because maybe she didn't want to leave. As you drift deeper into the underworld's quiet embrace, you feel something strange. Peace. Not the loud, triumphant peace of heroes, but a calm acceptance. Down here, everything slows. The gods above scream and sparkle, but Hades, he listens. You curl up in a soft shadow near the river Lethe, the stream of forgetfulness. It whispers gently, trying to lull you into letting go of everything. You hum a little tune Dionysus once sang. Cerberus's soft snores rumble through the cavern, and for a moment the end of all things feels warm. You awaken to a strange hissing sound, like wind rustling through dry leaves, or maybe snakes whispering secrets. You're no longer in the underworld, though that chill still clings to your skin. You're standing in a craggy, wind-swept wasteland, surrounded by statues frozen in mid-scream. Some cover their eyes, some kneel, some look like they were running and didn't make it. This isn't a battlefield, it's a graveyard of glances. And at its center stands a figure you know before you even see her face. Medusa. She's not what the stories promised. There's no monstrous roar, no slavering jaws. Instead, she stands quiet, almost statuesque herself, except for the snakes, coiled and shifting gently atop her head. Their scales shimmer like wet leaves. They seem tired. You step closer, slowly. Once upon a myth, Medusa was a beautiful maiden, so beautiful that Poseidon, lord of the sea, took a sudden and violent interest in her. And where did this tragedy happen? In Athena's temple. So instead of punishing Poseidon, Olympus never punished its golden boys. Athena cursed Medusa. Her hair became serpents. Her gaze turned the living to stone. She fled to the edge of the world, the only place no one else dared go. Historians still argue whether Medusa was originally a protective symbol, a victim, or an imported monster from older mythologies. Some say her head, used later as a weapon by Perseus, symbolized feminine rage. Others say she was just one more woman turned into a warning. You move through the silent stone crowd, careful not to look directly at her. But she doesn't seem to care. She stares at the sky now, not at you. There's something heartbreakingly resigned about her. Then somewhere on the wind you hear wings, leathered and fast. Perseus is coming. You duck behind a rock. He's young, polished, and holding a mirrored shield. The gods gave him every tool he'd need. Wings, sandals from Hermes, a blade from Hephaestus, and Athena's guidance, because nothing says fair fight like 5 divine sponsors. He doesn't look at Medusa, just at the reflection, the snake's hiss. She steps back, not out of fear, but maybe out of exhaustion. Then, quick, clean, tragic, it's over. Her head falls, eyes still open. But here's the strange part. From her blood springs life. Pegasus, the winged horse, leaps into the air, and Chrysaor, a warrior with a golden blade, follows. Even in death, Medusa creates beauty. You feel a twinge of something you can't quite name. Not horror, something softer. The myths always focus on the hero, but tonight you're standing beside the one who was hunted. Here's your mainstream fact. Medusa's face was carved on shields, temples, and coins, not as a threat, but as a ward. The Greeks believed her image could turn evil away, even if she herself was considered evil. And your curious tidbit. In some obscure versions, Medusa wasn't the only Gorgon, just the only mortal one. Her sisters, Stheno and Euryale, were immortal, which raises the uncomfortable question, why make just one of them able to die? Perseus flies away with the head, victorious, cheered by gods and mortals alike. But here in this stone garden, time slows again. The wind returns, the statues sigh, and Medusa's body rests beneath a sky too big to hold any more judgment. You lie down in the shadow of a serpent-shaped rock. The snakes are silent now. The moon blinks through the clouds like it's not quite sure what just happened. And in the quiet, you feel something ancient settle over you. Not fear, not anger, just the stillness of truth coiled gently around your dreams. You're walking through a desolate mountain range now, sharp winds tugging at your clothes, and the air thin enough to make your thoughts wander. The land here is bleak, nothing grows, and even the sky seems to keep its distance. You're on Mount Caucasus, and the only sound is a low, rhythmic groan. You follow it up a jagged path until you see him. Prometheus. Chained to a rock, ankles and wrists bound in unbreakable bronze. His body is weathered but unbowed. His eyes flicker like coals that refuse to go out. He sees you. He nods, not in greeting, but in grim understanding. And then you hear it. A shriek overhead. A wing beat. the eagle. It descends without ceremony, lands beside him, and begins its work. Every day the same punishment. It tears into his side, devouring his liver. Every night the organ regenerates, and Prometheus endures it all again. You wince. He doesn't. His mouth is set in a line of stubborn defiance. This isn't just torture, it's consequence. Prometheus stole fire from the gods, literal divine fire, and gave it to humans. Not just warmth, but civilization, light, cooking, metallurgy, comfort, everything that separates people from beasts. And for that, Zeus chained him here, where time has no mercy. Historians still argue whether Prometheus was a rebel hero, a cautionary tale, or a leftover Titan myth co-opted by humanists. Either way, he's humanity's mythological big brother, the one who took the beating so you could boil an egg. The eagle finishes and flies off. Prometheus slumps, not in weakness, but in patience. He'll heal. He always does. You sit beside him, your feet dangling off the edge of the world. He tells you stories, not in words, but in glances, in firelight flickers. He tells you of the early humans, huddled in caves, afraid of night. He tells you of the first sparks, the first warmth, the first stolen hope. He also tells you a sea. Prometheus knows something Zeus doesn't, that one day a child will be born more powerful than the thunder god himself, and that Zeus's rule, like all rules, has an end. That's the real reason he's chained, not for fire, but for knowing the future. Here's your historical grounding. Prometheus's name means forethought, and he was often contrasted with his brother Epimetheus, or afterthought. One plans ahead, one forgets to read the instructions. The Greeks loved this symbolic pairing, because honestly, who hasn't made a Prometheus-Epimetheus mistake during an all-nighter? And your quirky tidbit. Some versions of the myth say Prometheus also taught humans math, astronomy, and, oddly enough, how to trim their toenails, because nothing says divine rebellion like basic hygiene. The sun begins to rise. Prometheus stirs. His liver begins to grow back. You look at his face, scarred, yes, but unbroken. He doesn't ask for sympathy. He just wants you to remember. And as you lie back on a warm rock beside him, the wind softens. The fire inside you, lit long ago by his sacrifice, flickers gently in your chest. The eagle will come again, so will morning. And Prometheus will keep burning, not in pain, but in principle. And here's your odd tidbit. The flower isn't just named after him. It's mildly poisonous. Ingest enough narcissus root, and you'll end up in a sleep you might not wake from. Symbolic? Very. You wander the edge of the pond as he continues his silent vigil. He doesn't notice you. You're not his type. He only has eyes for himself. Nearby, the nymph Echo lingers among the trees, repeating things she hears, her voice fractured by heartbreak. She once loved Narcissus, tried to tell him so, but he ignored her too. Now she's just an echo, literally fading with each repetition, a girl made of shadows and syllables. The whole forest seems to mourn in stillness. The birds grow quiet. The water smooths out again. Narcissus sighs, reaching one last time, fingertips trembling just above the surface. You lie back in the grass and stare at the same sky he sees in the pond. It's soft today, smeared with clouds like a sleepy painter's brush. Somewhere, a narcissus flower leans gently toward its reflection, blooming with delicate purpose. Here's your mainstream fact to drift on. The myth of Narcissus was preserved by the Roman poet Ovid in his Metamorphoses, which served as the foundation for much of what the medieval world knew about Greek mythology. His retelling painted Narcissus as both tragic and unforgettable. And you're just a quiet observer, nestled in a myth that's less about punishment and more about longing, about what happens when love turns inward and refuses to look away. You close your eyes. The water stills. The wind hushes, and somewhere between your heartbeat and the reflection of a boy who loved too much, sleep begins to unfold. You're drifting again. This time not on clouds or rivers, but through a dense fog. Everything is soft and grey, like walking through a memory. Shapes begin to form. The fog parts slightly, and there she is. Pandora. She's not what you expected. No golden crown, no eerie glow, just a young woman with curious eyes, holding a box that's not really a box. It's more like a finely carved jar. Her fingers tremble around the lid. She hasn't opened it yet, not quite. You sit beside her in the silence, the air tense with the weight of what could happen. She looks at you, not fearful but uncertain, as if she's already been blamed for things she hasn't done. The myth always paints her the same way, the first woman crafted by the gods from earth and water, beauty sculpted into punishment, created by Hephaestus, gifted by the gods, intelligence from Athena, charm from Aphrodite, deception from Hermes, and then given to mankind by Zeus as a gift, which is never a good sign when it comes from him. Pandora's jar was her wedding present. No one told her what was inside, only that she mustn't open it. So naturally, she did. And what spilled out? Everything. Pain, sickness, war, sorrow. All the evils of the world swirling like smoke released into humanity forever. But, and this part people forget, when she slammed the lid shut, one thing remained: hope. Historians still argue whether Pandora was meant to be a warning against female curiosity or a misunderstood symbol of resilience. Some scholars think her name doesn't mean all gifted, as is often claimed, but all giving, which kind of changes everything. You glance at the jar in her lap. It's shut now, sealed tightly, trembling slightly. You wonder what hope looks like, if it's light or warmth or just silence that doesn't feel empty. Here's your historical anchor. Hesiod, one of the earliest Greek poets, is our main source for feuds, or Pandora's myth. And let's just say, he wasn't known for his progressive views on women. His telling paints her as the root of suffering, but later poets and philosophers weren't so sure. Some even saw her as a necessary beginning, the balance to Prometheus's fire. And your quirky tidbit? Ancient Greek jars, or pithoi, weren't small jewelry box type things. They were massive storage containers, more like barrels than boxes, which makes Pandora's story less about opening a trinket and more about popping the cork on a cosmic vat of doom. Cheers. Pandora sets the jar down between you, both of you staring at it, not with fear but with curiosity. After all, isn't that the point? Not the evil but the wondering, the choice, the risk of knowing. You lie back beside her in the field of ash-coloured flowers. The world is quieter now, but not hopeless. Hope is still there, sealed inside or floating just above your heart, soft, persistent, humming beneath the weight of all the things you wish were different. As the fog begins to settle again, Pandora closes her eyes. You follow, and the jar remains closed, but it doesn't feel like an ending, more like the middle of a very long sigh. You wake to the salty tang of sea breeze and the rhythmic hiss of waves curling against a shore. Sand clings to your skin, warm from the sun, as you push yourself up and squint at the horizon. And there, emerging from the foam, like a dream someone whispered into the ocean, is Aphrodite. She doesn't walk, she glides. Sea foam trails her like silk, and every step she takes seems to coax flowers from the sand. The sun doesn't shine on her, it follows her. She looks at you and smiles the kind of smile that makes poets write terrible metaphors. You've heard the stories. Born from sea foam, they say, sprung from the sea after Cronus castrated Uranus and flung his bits into the ocean. Yes, it's a weird origin story. Greek myths rarely pull punches. And yet, out of that primal chaos came this: beauty, desire, and unbearable longing. Aphrodite isn't just pretty. She's magnetic, unignorable, the kind of beautiful that makes entire cities collapse just to stand near it. And she knows it. She waves you over to walk with her, her bare feet barely touching the sand. Birds circle lazily overhead. Dolphins breach in the distance. You could be dreaming. You probably are. As you stroll along the shore, she talks not about love, but about power, because desire is power. Wars start over it. Empires fall to it. Even gods bend in its wake. She knows that beauty is only the wrapping. It's the ache it causes that gives her strength. She tells you about the Trojan War, casually, how it all started with a golden apple tossed into a divine banquet labelled for the fairest. Hera, Athena and Aphrodite all claimed it. So Paris of Troy was asked to choose between them. Aphrodite promised him the love of the most beautiful woman alive, Helen. And well, you know how that turned out. One apple, one war, 1,000 ships. Historians still argue whether Aphrodite was imported from Eastern fertility goddesses or was uniquely Greek. Her connections to Cyprus and older traditions suggest she's much older than the Olympian soap opera would have you believe. And your fringe fact for tonight? The name Aphrodite may stem from Aphros, Greek for foam. But some scholars think her name came from an entirely different culture, absorbed into Greek mythology like a perfume lingering after the source has vanished. You stop beneath a fig tree, the sun casting warm golden bars across the sand. She leans against the trunk, watching mortals fall in love and fall apart below. She seems amused, a little sad, as if she knows that every love is a spark dancing on a short fuse, and loves it anyway. She gives you a flower. It blooms the second it touches your hand. You blink, and she's already walking away, vanishing again into the sea mist, leaving nothing behind but the scent of roses and something sharp beneath it, something like longing. You lie back in the sand. The waves kiss your feet like they miss you. The sky above fades into lavender, and for a moment you understand. Love isn't soft. It's wild, divine, dangerous. But it's also the only thing that makes mortals dare to chase gods. Night has crept in without warning, like a cat curling up beside you unnoticed. Stars glint above like chips in obsidian. The ocean's roar is far behind now, and you find yourself in a rocky gorge lit by flickering torches wedged into jagged stone. This place feels older than Olympus, colder too. You've entered the domain of vengeance, and at its heart stands a trio of figures cloaked in shadow and lore. The Furies, Alecto, Megaera, Tisiphone. They don't have wings exactly, more like veils of darkness that flutter behind them. Their eyes burn not with fire but with knowing. They move without sound, trailing strands of night and guilt behind them. They're not here to play games. They're here to make wrongs right, brutally. Born from the blood of Uranus after his celestial dismemberment, the Furies are older than Zeus, older than law, older than logic. They represent a justice more primal than courts or gods, the kind that creeps into your dreams after a lie, the kind that doesn't forget. They guard moral boundaries, especially within families. Betray your blood and they will follow you. There is no hiding, no bribe, no pleas, just cold, echoing pursuit. You watch them now as they trail behind a trembling figure, Orestes. He's drenched in sweat, stumbling through the dark, haunted. Why? Because he killed his mother. Yes, she killed his father first. Yes, it was complicated, but blood is blood, and the Furies don't deal in nuance. Historians still argue whether the Furies were meant as literal goddesses or psychological metaphors. Were they nightmares or divine accountants? Either way, the Greeks respected fear, and these three were fear with paperwork. You stay low as they pass. The air buzzes with tension. Orestes is headed for trial, not in a mortal court, but in Athens itself, where Athena will weigh justice versus tradition. It's the first time these ancient forces will be challenged by reason, the first spark of the idea that vengeance can be negotiated. Here's your mainstream history fact. The myth of Orestes and the Furies formed the basis of the Eumenides, the final play in Aeschylus's Oresteia trilogy. It depicted the founding of the Areopagus, a real-life Athenian court, turning myth into judicial metaphor. And your offbeat tidbit? The Furies were later euphemistically called the kindly ones to avoid attracting their attention. It's the ancient equivalent of saying he who must not be named, with slightly better teeth. Eventually, the Furies relent, not because they forget, but because they evolve. Athena offers them a new place, not as hunters, but as protectors of justice in a civilized world. The Furies become the Eumenides, or well-minded ones. Vengeance tempers into balance. Rage learns to listen. You sit on a stone ledge as the torchlight flickers and fades. The gorge grows quiet. Justice has been given a new name, and though the Furies disappear into myth, their footsteps still echo in every courtroom, every conscience, every whispered prayer of, "Please let this not come back to haunt me." You close your eyes, wrapped in cool night air and the hum of restored balance. Tonight, no one is hunting you. Tonight, justice has found its rest. You awaken beneath a sky so wide and clean it almost hurts to look at. The stars are fading, the first fingers of morning sliding over the mountains. There's a scent in the air, pine, smoke, and something sharp like ambition. You're high above the mortal world now, standing on a narrow cliff path carved into a rugged slope. Ahead, a figure climbs barefoot, draped in a cloak of red and gold. He moves with grace, with fire in his posture. You follow. This is Orpheus, the poet, the musician, the man whose songs made stones weep and rivers bend their course. He's quiet, focused, humming something so soft it blends with the wind, and strung across his back like a heartbeat stitched in wood is his lyre. You've caught him in a strange moment, not in performance, but in pursuit. He's walking toward the entrance of the underworld, again. The story behind him is heavy. Orpheus loved a woman named Eurydice, too deeply, too honestly, and she died too soon, bitten by a snake, the cruel punctuation of a perfect romance. Most mortals mourn and move on. Orpheus did neither. Instead, he played. His grief became melody. His sorrow echoed across land and sea, up to Olympus and down to Hades. No one, not even the Lord of the Dead, could resist. Moved by music, Hades made an unthinkable deal. Eurydice could return with Orpheus to the living world, but only if he didn't look back at her until they reached the light. Simple instruction, impossible task. You walk behind him now, watching it happen again, that moment. They're near the surface. He's almost there. He steps into the sun and he can't resist. He turns, and she vanishes, gone forever this time. Historians still argue whether Orpheus was a real figure, a mythologized poet-priest of an ancient mystery cult, or a metaphor for how art tries and fails to defeat death. His myth is echoed in stories from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and even early Christian traditions. You and he sit now at the edge of the world, watching the sun rise without her. He plucks at the lyre, and even the wind pauses to listen. Each note is a memory, each chord a goodbye. Here's your mainstream fact. The cult of Orpheus, known as Orphism, believed in the soul's immortality and reincarnation. Initiates followed sacred rites and music to purify themselves over lifetimes. Orpheus wasn't just a character, he was a guide through the afterlife. And your fringe tidbit. Some ancient writers claimed Orpheus met his end at the hands of Maenads, frenzied female followers of Dionysus, because he rejected all women after Eurydice, torn apart by wild ecstasy for choosing devotion over pleasure, poetic if grim. You rise, Orpheus doesn't. He will sit here a while longer, perhaps forever, plucking stories from his sorrow. His music no longer defies death, it serenades it. He no longer begs for reversal, he just remembers. You leave him there, the sun behind you, the strings echoing into the dawn. Each step you take feels heavier, like you're carrying a fragment of his melody in your bones. But there's peace in it too. Because in a world where gods cheat, monsters chase, and heroes fall, Orpheus reminds you that love, grief and all, is the one song worth repeating. You walk for what feels like forever, carried gently along by the breeze of dawn, through forests turning golden and across hills painted in the earliest shades of sunlight. The world seems quieter now, as if the myths themselves are catching their breath. One final story waits for you, curled beneath the roots of memory. And there he is. Icarus, not falling, not yet. Just standing at the edge of a tall, narrow cliff overlooking an endless stretch of sea, his feet bare, a bundle of wax and feathers clutched under one arm. His father, Daedalus, the great inventor, stands beside him, adjusting the makeshift wings with calloused fingers and a face carved from worry. You recognize the scene immediately. It's the moment before the fall. They've just escaped the labyrinth of Crete. Yes, that labyrinth, the one built to contain the Minotaur, the beast born from divine pranks and poor architectural decisions. The walls twisted for miles, designed by Daedalus himself. But when he fell out of favor with King Minos, he and Icarus were imprisoned in their own maze. So Daedalus did the impossible, crafted wings from feathers and wax, held together with genius and desperation. And now, here they are. The old man speaks. Don't fly too high. The sun will melt the wax. Don't fly too low. The sea will soak the feathers. Moderation, always moderation. Icarus nods. And then he leaps. You're watching from above now, somehow floating just out of time as Icarus lifts into the air. His face explodes into light. This isn't about escape anymore. It's about joy. About that dizzy, weightless second when you forget everything except that you're free. Historians still argue whether the myth of Icarus was a cautionary tale against hubris or a hidden metaphor for the costs of ambition. Some think it was a story told by sailors to warn their sons. Others see Icarus not as arrogant, but simply human. He climbs. The sea shrinks below. The wind rushes louder. The sun grows fat and golden. You want to shout, "Stop! Just level out! You've made it!" But he can't hear you. Or maybe he does, but the feeling is too intoxicating. And then the wax melts. Feathers peel away like snow. The wings come undone. For a heartbeat, Icarus hangs suspended, like a question that doesn't want to be answered. Then he falls. The water accepts him without judgment. Daedalus cries out, but there's no sound. Just the lapping of waves, the soft settling of feathers on the sea's surface. A silent splash swallowed by myth. Here's your mainstream fact to sleep on. The story of Daedalus and Icarus first appears in Ovid's Metamorphoses, again, and became a symbol for countless writers, artists, and thinkers across the centuries. From Shakespeare to NASA engineers, the flight of Icarus has haunted and inspired. And your peculiar tidbit, the earliest image of Icarus falling comes from a Greek vase, where his legs dangle just above the sea. No drama, no explosion, just one simple, quiet moment of descent. You lie on the beach now, next to a lone feather. The sea is calm, the sun warm, the myth is over, but the feeling lingers. Not the fall, but the flight. Because sometimes, even if it ends in a splash, the act of reaching upward is its own kind of poetry. You breathe deeply. Your journey through gods, monsters, and mortals is ending. The cliffs fade, the sky dims, and in your chest You carry a little wax, a little fire, and a quiet ache for something you can't quite name. And now you let go. You feel yourself sinking slowly, gently into something deeper than sleep, a soft cradle of stories and stars where time stretches out like warm honey. The myths are quiet now. The gods are distant. Their voices, once thunder and flame, have softened into echoes that hum beneath your breath. You remember the weight of Athena's armor, the shimmer of Dionysus's laughter, the slow, steady silence of the underworld. They're all still with you, not as loud declarations, but as warmth around your shoulders. You drift through fields of narcissus, through drifting feathers, through misty rivers lined with old truths and forgotten names. A snake hisses gently from Medusa's hair. Orpheus hums something mournful and sweet. Even the Furies, once so fierce, nod quietly in the shadows. Above, the sky folds itself into dusk. Below, the earth holds you like a memory. You've wandered far, from Olympus to the ocean, from tragedy to trickery, from fire to flight. But you're home now, not in a palace or a cave or a temple, but in the slow rhythm of your breath, in the weightless drift between waking and dreaming, a place older than myth, deeper than words. So breathe out, let the stories settle, let the noise of the world blur into stillness. And if, in your dreams tonight, you hear a harp, or feel the flutter of wings, or catch the scent of sea foam, just smile. You've walked among legends, and they've left their fingerprints in your sleep. You don't have to remember every name, every warning, every lesson. You only have to rest. And when morning comes, carry that softness with you, like a whisper from a world where even the gods sleep sometimes.